Hello YouTube. Here we have my server setup. I finally decided to make myself a server. It used to be this Dell Dimension 2350. I never made a video of it at the time, but this was my server for a little bit. It held it pretty well. But the Pentium 4 was getting a little too long in the tooth because the bus speed was too slow. And single core, non-hyper-threading. It's not enough for certain things to handle. But this over here is my server now. As you can see, I'm not running a GUI at the moment. I have this in a configuration of which I call an optional GUI, which is where in Linux you do not install a login manager. What I did was I just installed XFCE, and that was it. Without GDM or KDM or Slim or any of that. So that it didn't just boot up into a login manager when you started the computer, because you don't exactly want a GUI running on a server, by default, in my opinion anyway. This is the case I got for it. This thing has a handle. I love the handle. Other than that, it's not that bad a quality actually. I got it for about 25 bucks from Newegg, and it is called the Super Case. Lol. It's got a button there. That blue is coming from a fan. That's not built into the case if you buy it. But it's got the green light. It's got a red light for the hard drive. But here's one thing I find funny about this case. They have the power button here and the reset button up here, which it's like, lol, what? 2 3.5-inch external bays, 2 CD drive bays, 5-inch bays. Here's a nice touch. The USB ports and the front mic and audio, the front audio and the front USB ports are covered by a little flap there. I have the derp 15-inch monitor hooked up to it, my Chinese crap one, but it's lasted 5 years, so it's not really crap. Here's the side of the case. I got a fan running in there, blowing on the CPU. I got a fan down here I shoehorned into the case, blowing towards the graphics card. Believe it or not, I'm running a graphics card in a server, as weird as that is, but I'll explain why later. Let's open this up and take a look at it. Antec fans, for the most part. They make great fans. I got a boatload of hard drives in here. 1 terabyte Caviar Green. Which drive is this? 320 gig Western Digital Caviar Blue. Let's see, the green is SATA, this one is PATA or IDE. I do not recommend buying Western Digital Caviar Blue drives because I've had a couple of them die on me, including one do that recently, which is a shame. Here I have a 250 gig drive, which is about 3 years old, all PATA. Everything is PATA in this computer except for the 1 terabyte drive. So that's a 250 gig PATA drive. Western Digital, and here is a recertified Western Digital Caviar Blue 500 gigabytes PATA. This drive I had to send in because the board on the bottom had crappy soldering, and I was starting to see oxidation on the board, and that's bad. That's very bad. The boot drive I shoehorned up here. You can't really see it because this IDE cable's in the way, but that is a 7-year-old Western Digital hard drive, 40 gigabytes PATA. I'm using that as the boot drive. You might be able to hear how whiny it is. It's a very whiny spindle on that hard drive. But the thing has no bad sectors, has no signs of age, it's working perfectly. They made hard drives very well back then. And that's companies in general, not just Western Digital. As you can see, I have a generic crappy Chinese fan that came with the case as a case fan. There's the stock AMD cooler on there. This board is my old 939 BioStar board, which I've nicknamed the Biohazard. In here I have a socket 939, 2.2 gigahertz AMD Athlon X2, 4400 plus. I have 3 gigabytes of Patriot RAM in there. That's 2 1-gig sticks and 2 512 sticks. I have an ATI Radeon X600 card in this computer, and there is and I know it's odd to have a graphics card in a server, but here's the dilemma. It does have onboard graphics, but this is an Enforce chipset on the board, which means it'll have onboard NVIDIA graphics. And support for the older NVIDIA chips in Linux is not great, mainly because the open source Novell drivers just don't work. They just don't work. I mean, you try to bring up a screen, and it just gives you a bunch of garbage. Below the graphics card, I have an IDE RAID card, which I'm not using in RAID, but it holds enough PATA ports for all the hard drives in this machine. PATA is perfect for storage for a file server because you don't need much speed when just transferring data over the network anyway, which is not even as fast as PATA is. So, there you have it. I guess I'll show you the back of this thing. PS2 ports are filled up with keyboard and mouse. There's the Ethernet, and there's the graphics. And there you have it. This is my server. Now this thing is actually a little bit annoying to put back on because the cable mess is annoying, as you can see. But that's because the power supplies cables are kind of all over the place. I've tried to manage them, but this here is a mess. Yeah, there's a fan back there too for the hard drives, a 120mm fan. Power supply. This is an Ultra LSP 550, so it's a 550 watt ATX power supply. These Ultra power supplies are really nice. If you take a look at the, let me focus that here. If you take a look at the 12-volt rail, it's all one rail, 18 watts. Wait, is it? No. I'm reading this wrong. Sorry. Derp. You go to the 12-volt rail here, and you can see you get 30 amps on one 12-volt rail. Very, very powerful power supply. And it has a very big fan in the bottom. These are excellent. I'd recommend either Ultra or Antec power supplies. I've had bad luck with Cooler Master power supplies. One of them killed my first build ever, and that was disappointing. But that's my server. Now let's actually take a look at what's running on this thing. I'm not going to put the case back on because it's really annoying to put back on. Now let's take a look at what's actually running on this thing. First I'm going to shut it down by typing halt. I have to be root to do that. Sudo halt. Type in the password. And it'll shut off. And we can watch the computer shut off. And yes, I'm shutting down a server. There you have it. Now I'll hit the button. I want to add that part of the reason I'm using my old AMD board is because one of the SATA ports is broken off of it, and it only had 2. So, yeah. As you can see, it detects the RAID array on... Well, it's not a RAID array, it's just an array of drives on that card before it actually boots up. Lol at Pigeon. And here it goes. As you can see, it's just your average computer. And of course, as you can see here, it's running Debian testing, which currently is Squeeze. I'm probably going to end up changing the repos to testing on here rather than Squeeze so that it actually updates. And of course, I'm using the 64-bit version of Debian testing with the LTS kernel. So let's boot this thing up. And a thing about the Radeon drivers, I should mention with the video card, is that the open source Radeon drivers actually work quite well for the older cards. And the card in there is an ATI Radeon X600. It has 256 megabytes of video RAM on it. Very much overkill for a server, but it'll work. It doesn't matter. And of course, here we are. Debian Squeeze. So let's log in and see. See, when I log in, all I get is the TTY, and that's perfect for a server, so you don't have any GUI just bogging down the system. Now, I can always go into a GUI if I just type startx. And it'll load, whoa, random stuff right there. Then it'll load XFCE right up. There you are, XFCE. Of course it connects to the internet and all that fun stuff. System load is quite a bit actually, wow. So let's actually go in here and take a look at system itself. Now I've installed GNOME system tools into XFCE, and it just makes life a lot easier. There we go, it's a dual core processor, as you can see. 3 gigs of memory, about a gig of swap. And it doesn't recognize itself at first, and then it does. Lol. Debian testing, as you can see right there. Debian Squeeze, as it is. It's using GNOME 2.30.2. Shows you the processor there. Available disk space is nothing because I'm using all PATA drives, apart from the 1 terabyte. And there you have it. And there's the system doing its thing. And what I use this server for is a file server. So I can go onto my Windows machine. Shout out to people from the TeamSpeak. I've been poked. Lol. I can go to network. Go to the server. And let's say I go to the 1 terabyte drive. There we are. Urban Terra Maps, torrents, there's a bunch of Linux crap in there. Downloads, this is an old downloads folder, lost and found. That's what ext3 uses for journaling, I think. But yeah, I can get into these folders, which is pretty awesome. It's a Samba server I have set up on here. I also run game servers on this thing, and for that purpose we'll actually log out of the GUI for now. And of course I'll switch to another TTY, like TTY number 2, which you do by Control-Alt-F2. And you get another TTY to log into. There's some commands I put in here recently. This is the Counter-Strike server. The Counter-Strike source, actually, so I'll start that. Oh yeah, I need to change directories first. Change directories, then start the server. Here it goes. And this will load game servers. Now, I don't have these servers public because I know about the failing stuff right there. There's missing textures in in the maps that I loaded right there. But I don't have these servers public because I don't want my bandwidth cap to be exceeded, because Comcast does these things to people. Yeah. So don't ask me to make it public. I won't, because I don't want to get the bandwidth cap, too high. I also have an Urban Terror server. I usually use these servers for friends. And there's the Urban Terror server, starting up right there. And there you go. This is how I use my server box. I use it for some game servers, Samba file sharing. I administer the server with a program called Webmin, which I definitely recommend downloading if you have servers at home. It allows you to administer the system through a web GUI. for example, on this computer, like if I was in the GUI at the moment, I could go to localhost port whatever you set it to, or use the default one for webmin. Then you could just administer the entire computer. I set up Samba through webmin, which makes life a lot easier because you can manage those remotely, which is totally awesome. But yeah, if you have an old computer lying around that has at least a dual core in it, you could run game servers no problem. And if you have a computer that has a single core processor in it lying around, make it a file server. You know, I mean, you could get a NAS drive or one of those hard drive enclosures with an Ethernet cord, but you could use a computer to do it as well. I prefer doing that most of the time because I can choose what format the drives are fairly easily. I can move files between drives without problems. I just have a lot of control. I formatted every single drive in this computer as ext3, mainly because ext4, if it finds a corrupt file, it deletes that entire file. ext3, you can actually recover a lot more easily from damage done to your files. I've been told that XFS is great for DVRs because XFS handles videos very well because it is just a fast file system, but its journal checking is not that great compared to ext3 and ext2. Actually, ext2 doesn't have journaling, but it's a pretty stable file system. Either way, ext3 on all these drives. And that's my server setup. I hope you enjoyed the video. If any of you guys want advice on what to do with an old computer and how to make it a server, feel free to leave comments. I mean, you can, if you just have an old, let's say you have an old Dell lying around, you could make that into a file server, for example. One thing I haven't done to this machine yet that it will become is also a print server. I'm going to use Samba and Cups for sharing printers. And of course down here I have a LaserJet 1020, and that's what will be hooked up to this thing. And yeah, that's the server setup. Hope you enjoyed the video. Have a good one, everybody. Ciao.